So today we're going to be looking at PragerU. Now, first things first, before we continue, other people do much better videos on PragerU than me, partly because they spend the time to edit them. But as I have said in the past, video editing is pretty much my full-time job, so the last thing I generally want to do is spend my free time editing, essentially. That's it. But if you want to go watch the guy who inspired this video, he's a guy called PoliDice. And the PragerU video we're talking about, I'll try and find it and leave a link down it below, is basically what is nationalism and why you shouldn't be ashamed. In fact, this is the guy who's in the video, I can't remember his name now, but he wrote a book called The Virtues of Nationalism. And one of the things I've noticed about PragerU is they are historically illiterate. That's the best way to put it. But there are two things he says in this video about history in particular, which I was like, okay, that's wrong. So this first claim is, he claims that the very first ever nationalist in the entire world was Henry VIII. And he uses this to justify it by this small, his justification for this is this small paragraph in Henry VIII's declaration and break from Rome, is that the monarch shall not be put upon by papal audits. Now, for those of you who don't know, maybe we need to go into a brief discussion of who Henry VIII was. Basically, Henry VIII, he was a Tudor. He came after Henry VII. Pretty obvious. But Henry VIII's reign predominantly was defined by his break with Rome and the Protestantization, or the Anglicanization, as what it became known, of the United Kingdom. And why did this happen? Well, his entire break was because he wanted to get dissolve his alliance, dissolve his marriage and alliance at the same time with Catherine of Aragon. Because, well, at that time, Aragon, it didn't exist. It wasn't a major power anymore. And not only that, at the time, relations between the new kingdom of Spain and the growing sort of trading empire that Britain was about to become was in conflict with each other. Tensions were growing, and quite frankly, Henry wanted a new alliance, but he couldn't do it so long as he was trapped into that alliance. Now, the Pope wouldn't let him out of that alliance because he knew that, again, he was a fan of Spain, because pretty much all the popes, once Spain unified, loved Spain. And if you know anything about papal history, then you must know that the Pope at that time was a major power player right up to the Enlightenment period. So the idea that this was done for nationalistic purposes was completely false. Henry VIII did this because he wanted to have a male heir. That was his ultimate goal and aim. So he went and married Anne Boleyn. He didn't achieve that either with Anne Boleyn, so he went and got another divorce. That's why he didn't join with the Protestant Reformation that was going on in Germany. He went and made his own church because the early Protestants were not for divorce either. So he made his own church and, pushed through divorce, and he was the head, so he had control. Not only that, but you had the whole thing of that Catholics must be subservient to the Pope first and then the King second. This was something because if, especially the churches and the monasteries, if they didn't want to pay taxes, well, they just said, well, we made a tithe to the Pope this year instead. That's how things went. So Henry VIII, the idea of him being the first nationalist, is highly, highly dubious, to say the least. But there you go. The second claim that's made in this video, which again, massively historically illiterate by them, was that the World War I and II, that the causes of them were not nationalism. And this is something that is just outright flatly wrong. So one of the main big things about nationalism is that your country is number one and it is better than everyone else. And the whole nationalism thing kicked off because Germany gave Austro-Hungary a blank check to go and do to Serbia whatever it wanted to prove that it was the dominant power. However, that didn't work out, and basically before that, even before that, constant tension was running before World War I anyway, and all the countries were out there, you know, swinging the big battleships about, going, "Ooh, look, how good are we?" So nationalism was an absolute cause, or at least one of the causes of World War I. You get into World War II, and hilariously, right at the beginning of the video, he goes, "Here are some famous nationalists." Again, debatable whether they are nationalists or not. But you just surprisingly, whenever you see this discussed, Adolf Hitler doesn't come up very often, because obviously the guy's written a book called The Virtues of Nationalism. So he completely, I'm guessing, I haven't read his book, but I can guarantee you there is not a single page in there decrying Hitler's nationalism and the fact that the Germans people were the ultimate Übermensch and that they deserved all the land and that it should be cleared away of the filthy Slavs. Slavs being I believe it's I can't remember what the origin of the word is, but I think the origin is slaves. To basically clear away all this living space that can be available for the German people, and they can spread, you know, out. That was nationalism. That was Germany's nationalism. That was, you know, that was nationalism. And to say that World War I and World War II, that the causes of those two wars weren't nationalism, is highly, completely annihilates any in-depth analysis of history that this guy's apparently done. Or if not, he's been very selective about the history he's actually read, which, again, it's on PragerU, so it's not surprising. But there you go. Like I say, go watch PoliDice's video on it as well. He goes into it deeper, especially nitpicking about some of the leaders he brought up and other things as well. But those are the two main things I wanted to bring out because, yeah, PragerU is, you know, anyone who... This worrying thing about PragerU is that somewhere there are people who are actually being homeschooled by PragerU. That's the worrying thing.